Hey, tonight we're diving into a thrilling journey back to the Viking Age, a time of fearless explorers, skilled craftsmen, and legendary warriors who sailed the seas in search of riches, land, and glory. Before we begin, grab a cozy blanket, dim the lights, and maybe light a candle to create that perfect atmosphere for our time-traveling adventure. This story works best when you're completely relaxed, so take a deep breath and prepare to be transported to a world both beautiful and harsh, where survival required strength, wit, and courage beyond anything we need in our modern lives. Congratulations, you've just woken up in the late 8th century, somewhere along the rugged coast of Norway. The year is 793 CE, and you find yourself in a world completely different from the one you're used to. The air smells of salt, smoke, and pine. The distant sound of waves crashing against rocky shores blends with the calls of seabirds circling overhead. You blink your eyes, trying to adjust to the dim light filtering through the smoke hole in the ceiling. You're lying on a hard wooden bench inside a longhouse, a dwelling that serves as both home and gathering place for an entire family, sometimes even several families. Furs and woolen blankets provide some cushioning against the rough wood, but nothing like the soft mattress you're accustomed to. The good news is that this dwelling is ingeniously designed to keep heat from the central hearth circulating throughout the space. The bad news? You're sharing it with not just people, but also with chickens pecking at the earthen floor and, during the harshest winter nights, even larger livestock. The longhouse stretches before you, its wooden walls bowed like the hull of a ship. Wooden posts support the thatched roof, and between them hang shields, spears, and everyday tools. You notice that everything here serves a purpose. There's no room for purely decorative items in a world where survival depends on practicality. Light streams in from the smoke hole above the central hearth, where embers from last night's fire still glow faintly. As you sit up, your muscles ache from the firm sleeping surface. A woman with golden hair braided intricately around her head glances at you as she stirs something in an iron pot hanging over the freshly stoked fire. She wears a simple ankle-length dress of undyed wool with a colorful apron-like garment over it, fastened at the shoulders with two ornate brooches connected by strings of beads. Around her neck hangs a small hammer-shaped pendant. Thor's hammer, you realize, a symbol of protection. You've slept long enough, she says, in a language that somehow you understand. There's work to be done before the men return from fishing. You rub your eyes, wondering how you'll manage to blend into this world so different from your own. Everything around you seems both familiar and alien. Simple wooden furniture, tools hanging from the walls, the smell of porridge cooking, but all with a distinctly foreign quality that reminds you just how far from home you truly are. Outside, voices call to one another in a melodic language that rises and falls like the waves. Children laugh as they chase chickens around the muddy paths between buildings. Dogs bark excitedly as they follow their young masters. Through the open door, you glimpse other longhouses clustered together, smoke rising from their roofs into the crisp morning air. Beyond them lies a shimmering fjord where several longships are anchored, their dragon-headed prows seeming to watch over the settlement. "Here," the woman says, handing you a wooden bowl filled with a thick porridge. "Eat quickly. There's wool to be spun, bread to be baked, and the goats need milking." You accept the bowl, feeling its warmth against your palms. The porridge is bland but filling, made of barley and oats with a swirl of honey. As you eat, you notice others in the longhouse stirring, children rubbing sleep from their eyes, an older woman already working at a loom in the corner. "My husband Leif and the others sailed out at dawn," the woman continues, glancing toward the door. "They hope to catch enough fish for the coming feast. The Jarl has called all free men to his hall in 3 days' time to discuss the summer raids." The summer raids. The words send a chill down your spine despite the warmth of the fire. You've woken up at the very beginning of what history will call the Viking Age. Somewhere across the sea, the monastery at Lindisfarne stands unaware that this will be the year when Viking longships arrive on their shores, marking the beginning of an era of exploration, trade, and yes, violence that will change the face of Europe forever. The woman, you learn her name is Astrid, sets you to work with a spindle, showing you how to draw the wool into thread. Your fingers fumble with the unfamiliar tool, and she clicks her tongue impatiently. Have you never spun before? Even a child knows how to do this, she says, taking the spindle and demonstrating with practiced motions. What kind of household did you come from that you don't know such basic skills? You mumble something vague about being from far away, which seems to satisfy her curiosity for the moment. She eyes your strange clothing with suspicion, but doesn't press further. Well, you're here now, and everyone works. That's the way of things, she says firmly. We survive together or not at all. That statement sums up life in this era better than anything else. In the Viking Age, survival depends on community, on each person contributing their skills to the welfare of all. There are no grocery stores, no hospitals, no safety nets beyond what the community provides for itself. If crops fail or fish become scarce, hunger follows. If raiders come from neighboring settlements, everyone must defend their home or lose everything. As the day progresses, you follow Astrid through her tasks, learning the rhythm of daily life. The good news is that, contrary to what you might have expected, personal cleanliness is highly valued among these people. The Vikings are actually quite fastidious compared to many of their contemporaries in Europe. On a weekly basis, usually on Saturday, which they call Lagar Dagur, or washing day, everyone bathes, a practice that would be considered excessive in many parts of medieval Europe. The bad news is that nearly every aspect of daily life involves intense physical labor. Merely preparing a meal requires grinding grain by hand with stone querns, fetching water from the well, maintaining the fire, and cooking in heavy iron pots. Making cloth starts with shearing sheep, then spinning wool into thread, weaving it on a loom, and finally sewing it into garments, all by hand and often in dim light. Even the simplest medicines must be prepared from herbs gathered in the wild and processed according to knowledge passed down through generations. By midday, your back aches and your hands are raw from unaccustomed work. Astrid notices your discomfort, but only smiles slightly. You'll grow stronger, she says, not unkindly. Everyone does, or they don't survive the winter. Winter. The word carries new weight in this world without central heating, without electric lights to push back the darkness of long northern nights, without modern transportation to bring food from warmer regions. Winter here is not just a season. It's a test of preparation, endurance, and community cohesion. As afternoon approaches, a horn sounds from the shore. Astrid straightens, listening. They're returning, she says, setting aside her weaving and moving quickly to the door. Come, let's see what they've brought. You follow her out into the settlement, where people are emerging from their homes and workshops, all heading toward the narrow wooden dock where several boats are pulling in. These aren't the massive longships you might have expected. Those fearsome dragon-prowed vessels are used for longer journeys and raids. These are smaller fishing boats, still skillfully made but designed for coastal fishing rather than ocean voyages. Men call out greetings as they secure their vessels, holding up strings of fish to appreciative cheers from those on shore. Children run to meet fathers and brothers, eagerly peering into the boats to see the day's catch. Dogs bark excitedly, darting between legs and sniffing hopefully at the fish being unloaded. Leaf, a tall man with a reddish beard streaked with gray, raises a hand in greeting when he spots Astrid. His arms are muscled from years of rowing and fishing, his face weathered from exposure to sun and sea. He looks to be in his 30s, but it's hard to tell for certain. Life in this era ages people faster than in your time. We had good fortune today, he tells Astrid as he hands her several large cod. The sea was generous. Njord smiled on you, she replies, referring to the Norse god of the sea and fishing. Perhaps, Leif agrees, then lowers his voice. Bjorn's ship returned while we were out. He brought news from the south. The Franks are growing weaker, divided between brothers fighting for power. Their coastal monasteries are unguarded, filled with gold and silver. Astrid's expression grows serious. You're thinking of joining the raid, aren't you? Leif glances at you, noticing your presence perhaps for the first time. We'll speak more of this later, he says, before turning to help the other men unload their catch. You follow Astrid back to the longhouse, where she immediately sets to work preparing the fish. With practiced motions, she fillets them using a sharp iron knife, setting aside the best portions for immediate cooking and hanging the rest on racks near the fire to be smoked and preserved. Here, she says, handing you a knife of your own and pointing to a pile of vegetables, onions, carrots, and something that looks like turnips. Cut these for the stew. As you work alongside her, Astrid begins to talk, perhaps sensing your curiosity about this world you've found yourself in. My husband is a good man, a respected man in our community, she says, her knife never pausing in its work. He has a boat of his own and land to farm. We have 4 children who lived past infancy. We are blessed by the gods for that. You learn that 3 of their children are grown, 2 sons who have their own families now, and a daughter who married a man from another settlement. The 4th, a boy of 12 named Eric, is currently helping his father with the boats. But Leif dreams of more, Astrid continues, her voice dropping slightly, despite the fact that you're alone in the house. He hears the stories from those who have sailed to distant lands, who have brought back silver and thralls. The word thralls, you realize, refers to slaves, people captured during raids and brought back to work the farms and households of the Norse. Do you think he'll go? You ask cautiously, not wanting to seem too ignorant of their customs, but curious about what's coming. Astrid sighs as she tosses the fish into a large pot. Men seek glory and wealth. It's in their nature. And times have been difficult these past few years. Poor harvests, harder winters. Many believe that raiding is the answer, that the gods favor those bold enough to take what they need. As evening approaches, more people gather in the longhouse. You meet Eric, a skinny boy with his father's reddish hair who watches you with open curiosity. Several neighbors arrive, bringing contributions to the meal. Freshly baked bread, fermented milk that tastes something like yogurt, berries preserved from last summer's harvest. The longhouse fills with conversation and laughter as people share news and stories. Leif and several other men sit near the fire, talking in low voices about lands across the sea, about monasteries filled with treasure, about the glory that awaits those brave enough to venture into unknown waters. You notice how the youngest men lean forward eagerly, their eyes bright with visions of adventure and wealth, while some of the older ones look more cautious, weighing risks against potential rewards. The Jarl says we'll need at least 4 ships, one man says, stroking his beard thoughtfully. Enough men to overwhelm any resistance quickly. And good weather, adds another. The Western Sea can be treacherous even in summer. The priests at these monasteries, they're not warriors, a young man points out eagerly. They won't fight back. Don't be too certain, cautions an older man with a long scar running down one side of his face. Any man will fight when cornered, and their god is powerful, so they say. Different from our gods, but powerful nonetheless. The conversation shifts to practical matters. how many men each ship will need, what provisions to take, the best time to depart. You listen, realizing you're witnessing the planning of what might be one of the earliest Viking raids on the British Isles, events that will transform European history. Later, as people begin to depart for their own homes and the fire burns low, life approaches you directly for the first time. Astrid tells me you're from distant lands, he says, studying your face in the flickering light, yet you speak our tongue? You fumble for an explanation that might make sense in this context. I've traveled far, you say carefully, and learned many languages along the way. Leif nods slowly, seemingly satisfied with this vague answer. A traveler. Perhaps you've seen the lands we speak of? The kingdoms across the western sea? When you hesitate, he continues. No matter. If you stay among us, you'll need to contribute. Can you work wood? Metal? Do you know healing herbs? Can you fight? The question catches you off guard. In your time, most people go their entire lives without needing to defend themselves physically. Here, it's simply another necessary skill, like cooking or farming. I'm willing to learn, you offer. Leif studies you for a moment longer, then nods. Good. Tomorrow you'll work with Gunnar the smith. He always needs someone to work the bellows. Hard work, but you'll earn your keep. As you settle back onto the wooden bench for the night, your body aching from unaccustomed labor, your mind races with everything you've experienced. The Viking Age is nothing like you imagined from books or television shows. It's not all battles and raids. Most of daily life revolves around the endless work of survival, growing food, making tools, producing clothing, maintaining shelter, yet underneath the ordinary rhythm of daily tasks runs a current of something else, a restless energy, a hunger for more than mere survival. You've sensed it in the way people speak of lands beyond the horizon, in the pride they take in their ships, in the stories they tell around the fire of ancestors who sailed into unknown waters and returned with wealth and tales of wonders. As sleep begins to claim you, your last thoughts are of the journey ahead. You've survived your first day in the Viking Age, but harder tests await. Tomorrow brings new challenges, new skills to learn, new dangers to navigate. And beyond that looms the summer and the raids that will launch the Viking Age in earnest, an age of exploration, conquest, and change that will reshape the world for centuries to come. In the darkness of the longhouse, with the embers of the fire casting faint red light on wooden beams overhead, you drift into dreams of dragon ships sailing toward distant shores, their carved prows cutting through waves like knives through cloth, bearing men seeking fortune, glory, and a place in the songs that will be sung for generations. Morning arrives with the crowing of roosters and the soft glow of dawn filtering through the smoke hole. You're already learning that in the Viking Age, people generally rise with the sun and sleep when darkness falls, a natural rhythm dictated by necessity rather than choice. The longhouse stirs to life around you as Astrid builds up the fire and begins preparing the morning meal. Today, as promised, you're to work with Gunnar the smith. After a breakfast of leftover fish stew and a chunk of dense, chewy bread, Leif leads you through the settlement to a small building set slightly apart from the others. Even from a distance, you can hear the rhythmic clanging of metal on metal and feel the heat radiating from the open doorway. Gunnar, Leif calls as you approach, I've brought you help for the day. The smith straightens from his work, setting aside a glowing piece of metal. He's a mountain of a man with massive arms and a chest like a barrel. His beard singed in places from flying sparks. Burns and small scars cover his forearms, testament to years at the forge. This one? Gunnar asks doubtfully, looking you up and down. Doesn't look strong enough to work the bellows for an hour, let alone a day. Everyone starts somewhere, Leif replies with a shrug. and we need those axe heads finished before the ships depart. Gunnar grunts in acknowledgement, then gestures for you to enter his domain. Come then, let's see what you're made of. Leaf leaves you in the smith's capable if intimidating hands. The forge is a simple structure with walls on 3 sides and an open front to allow heat to escape and light to enter. The heart of the space is the forge itself, a clay furnace where charcoal burns bright orange, fed by leather bellows that pump air to raise the temperature high enough to work iron. Your job is simple, Gunnar explains, pointing to the bellows, essentially a large leather bag attached to a wooden frame with handles. When I say pump, you pump. Steady rhythm, not too fast, not too slow. The fire needs to stay hot, but too much air can ruin the metal. Understand? You nod, and he positions you at the bellows while he returns to the piece he was working on, what appears to be an axe head, glowing red hot from the forge. He places it on his anvil and begins hammering with practiced strokes, each blow shaping the metal with precision born of years of experience. Pump, he commands, and you begin working the bellows, pulling and pushing the handles to force air into the forge. It's harder than it looks. The resistance surprises you, and within minutes your shoulders and back begin to ache from the repetitive motion. Sweat beads on your forehead, not just from exertion, but from the intense heat of the forge. Gunnar works methodically, heating the metal, hammering it into shape, then reheating it again. You notice he doesn't use many tools: a hammer, tongs, a punch for making holes, and a few iron implements for specialized shaping. Yet with these simple tools, he creates objects of both beauty and deadly functionality. Strong weapons mean survival, Gunnar says, noticing your interest as he plunges the red-hot axe head into a barrel of water, sending up a cloud of hissing steam. A poor blade breaks when you need it most. A good one saves your life. Throughout the morning, you learn that smithing is considered a magical art, as much as a practical one. Gunnar murmurs words over certain pieces, prayers or charms to the gods, especially to Thor, the thunder god associated with strength, and to Odin, the All-Father who sacrificed himself to gain wisdom and knowledge of the runes. The metal remembers every hammer blow, Gunnar tells you as he examines the edge of a newly forged knife blade. It remembers the fire, the water, the words spoken over it. All these things give it strength and purpose. By midday, your arms feel like lead and your back screams with pain, but Gunnar seems impressed that you've lasted this long without complaint. He calls for a break, and you gratefully collapse onto a wooden stool while he produces a water skin and a bundle containing dried meat and bread. As you eat, Gunnar becomes more talkative, explaining how iron is smelted from ore found in bogs or mined from the earth, how it's mixed with carbon to create steel of varying hardness, how different weapons require different properties in the metal. For an axe, he explains, you want the edge hard to hold sharpness, but the body more flexible to absorb shock. A sword needs to flex without breaking, while still holding its edge through many strikes. He shows you various weapons and tools in different stages of completion: spears with socket fittings for wooden shafts, shield bosses of iron to protect the hand holding the shield, knives for everyday use, and more elaborate pieces destined for the Jarl's Hall. The ships will need 20 good axes at least, Gunnar says, returning to work after the brief rest. Not for trees, for men. The casual way he speaks of weapons designed to kill sends a chill down your spine despite the heat of the forge. For Gunnar and the people of this time, violence isn't an aberration, but an expected part of life. Raids aren't seen as immoral, but as a legitimate way to acquire wealth and prestige. Different times, different values, a harsh reminder of how far from home you truly are. The afternoon passes in a blur of heat, sweat, and the rhythmic sound of hammer on metal. By the time Gunnar declares the day's work done, the sun is low in the sky and several completed axe heads hang from a rack, cooling and waiting to be fitted with wooden handles. "You did better than I expected," Gunnar admits as you prepare to leave. "Come back tomorrow. There's more to be done before the ships sail." You stumble back to Astrid and Leif's longhouse, every muscle screaming in protest. Astrid takes one look at your exhausted face and smoky clothing and nods with approval. "Gunnar worked you hard, I see," she says, handing you a wooden cup filled with something that smells strongly alcoholic. "Drink. It will help with the pain." The beverage burns going down, but leaves a pleasant warmth in its wake. Some kind of mead, you realize. Fermented honey mixed with herbs. As you sip it gratefully, you notice the longhouse is unusually busy this evening. Extra lamps burn, casting flickering light on groups of women working together at various tasks. Some card wool, others spin, and a few work at looms, their fingers flying as they create intricate patterns in the fabric. "We're preparing for the men's journey," Astrid explains, seeing your questioning look. "Ships need sails. Warriors need clothing. Everyone contributes." You join the women, helping where you can with simple tasks that don't require skills you haven't yet acquired. As you work, you listen to their conversation, which flows from practical matters to gossip to old tales told to pass the time. They say the monastery at Lindisfarne has a roof that shines like gold in the sun, one woman comments as she cards wool. "And books bound in jewels," adds another. "Their god must be very rich." "Their god has only one eye, like Odin," an older woman says with authority. "But they say he died and came back to life. Like Balder will after Ragnarok," someone else suggests, referring to the Norse god of light and purity, son of Odin and Frigg, who according to prophecy would return after the final battle that ends the world. Perhaps all gods are the same god, just wearing different faces for different peoples, the older woman muses, earning herself disapproving looks from some of the others. "Careful, Sigrid," Astrid warns. "Such talk borders on disrespect. The gods hear all." The conversation shifts to more immediate concerns. Which ships will go? Who will sail on them? What might be brought back? You learn that this won't be the first time men from this settlement have sailed to distant shores, but previous journeys were primarily for trade rather than raiding. This expedition represents something new, a more aggressive approach born of necessity and opportunity. "3 poor harvests in a row," one woman explains in a low voice, "and the fish not as plentiful as before. People are hungry, worried about the coming winter. And the Jarl needs to prove himself," another adds. "His father was a great leader, respected by all. The son must show he's worthy of the same loyalty." As darkness falls, men begin to arrive, joining the gathering. Leif returns with Eric, both carrying armfuls of freshly hewn wood for arrows. They settle near the fire, Leif showing his son how to shape the shafts using a small knife, carefully creating notches for the bowstring and the arrowhead. Throughout the evening, more neighbors drop by, turning the longhouse into an impromptu community workspace and social gathering. The atmosphere reminds you of an old-fashioned barn-raising or quilting bee, everyone contributing to a common goal while sharing news, jokes, and stories. One man produces a stringed instrument, something like a lyre, and soon music fills the space. People sing along to familiar tunes, songs about heroes and gods, about great journeys and battles fought long ago. You notice that these aren't just entertainment, but also serve to teach and reinforce cultural values. Courage, loyalty, hospitality, and cleverness are all celebrated in the verses. An older man with white hair and a deeply lined face begins to recite a poem in a rhythmic, chanting voice. Everyone falls silent to listen, even the children who had been playing noisily in a corner. You recognize this as a skald, a poet and storyteller responsible for preserving the community's history and mythology through oral tradition. The poem tells of the creation of the world from the body of the giant Ymir, slain by Odin and his brothers. It describes Yggdrasil, the world tree that connects the 9 realms of existence, and the gods who dwell in Asgard, ruling over the affairs of gods and men. The skald's voice rises and falls dramatically as he recounts the adventures of Thor battling giants, a Odin sacrifice to gain wisdom, a Loki's clever tricks and eventual betrayal. These stories, you realize, aren't just entertainment for these people. They're a framework for understanding the world, explaining everything from natural phenomena to human behavior. The gods and their tales provide models for how to live, warnings about the consequences of breaking social norms, and reassurance that there's order in what often seems a chaotic and dangerous world. As the evening progresses, the conversation inevitably turns to the upcoming raid. The Jarl, the local chieftain, has called a thing, an assembly of free men, to discuss the plans in detail. Such meetings are the closest thing the Norse have to a formal government, where disputes are settled, crimes judged, and important decisions made collectively. "Will you go with the ships, father?" Eric asks Leif, his young face serious in the firelight. Leif ruffles his son's hair affectionately. "Aye, I'll go. We need a good pilot who knows the stars and how to read the currents, and someone must look after these young hotheads who've never left sight of their mother's apron strings." There's gentle laughter at this, but you sense the underlying tension. Raiding is dangerous, with no guarantee of return. Everyone in the room knows that some who sail away may never come back, lost to storms or enemy weapons or any of the countless other perils that await those who venture into unknown territories. "What about the farm?" Eric persists. "The crops need tending." "That will be your responsibility," Leif tells him. "You're old enough now to take a man's duties. Your mother will guide you, and Gunnar has promised to keep an eye on things as well." Eric straightens, clearly proud to be entrusted with such responsibility, yet anxious about living up to it. "I won't disappoint you," he promises solemnly. "I know you won't," Leif says, his voice gentle. "You have your grandfather's good sense." Later, as the gathering begins to disperse, you help Astrid clean up, gathering empty cups and bowls, sweeping the floor, banking the fire for the night. She works silently for a while, then speaks abruptly. "You heard what was said tonight. Leif will go with the ships." You nod, uncertain how to respond. "He's a skilled navigator," she continues, "the best in the settlement. They need him." Again, you nod, sensing there's more she wants to say. "I've been his wife for 18 winters," Astrid says, her hands never pausing in their work. "I've watched him sail away many times, always fearing it would be the last. But this is different. This isn't trading with people who welcome our ships. This is taking what isn't freely given." "Are you afraid?" you ask quietly. "For him, always. For what this means for all of us?" She pauses, looking into the glowing embers of the fire. "The gods set many paths before us. Some lead to glory, others to destruction. Sometimes it's hard to tell one from the other until you've gone too far to turn back." The next morning, you return to Gunnar's forge, as promised. Your muscles protest every movement, still sore from the previous day's unaccustomed labor, but you find that the work goes easier now that you know what to expect. Gunnar seems pleased with your progress, even showing you how to do some simple hammering on heated metal, shaping it according to his instructions. "You've got a feel for it," he comments gruffly, which you gather is high praise from the taciturn smith. "With practice, you might make a decent apprentice." Throughout the day, you notice increased activity in the settlement. Men come and go from the shore, where the ships are being prepared for the journey. Barrels of provisions are carried down to be loaded, dried meat, flour, ale, and other necessities to sustain the crew during their voyage. Weapons are bundled and carried aboard, along with shields painted in bright colors to identify different groups of warriors. When you break for the midday meal, you walk down to the shore to watch the preparations more closely. The longships are truly impressive up close, sleek wooden vessels with high curved prows and sterns, designed for both speed and stability in rough seas. The largest is perhaps 80 feet long, with space for about 40 rowers sitting on benches that run the length of the ship. A single mast stands ready to carry a square sail when the wind is favorable. Men swarm over the vessels, checking every detail with meticulous care. Their lives will depend on these ships. A leak, a broken steering oar, a torn sail could mean disaster in the middle of the open sea. You notice that each ship has its own distinct personality, with carved decorations on the prow and unique patterns painted on the sail. "Beautiful, aren't they?" a voice says beside you. You turn to find Leaf, gazing at the ships with unmistakable pride. "Yes, you agree, honestly. I've never seen anything like them. Nor have the peoples across the sea," Leif says with a smile that doesn't quite reach his eyes. "Our ships can sail in water shallower than a man's height and cross open ocean with equal ease. No other people have vessels like these." "Is that why you're going? Because you can?" you ask, wondering what motivates these people to undertake such risky journeys. Leif considers the question seriously. "We go because we must," he says eventually. "The land here is beautiful but harsh. It doesn't always give us enough to sustain everyone, and a man needs more than just survival. He needs purpose, a chance to prove his worth, to make a name that will be remembered in the sagas." He gestures toward the largest ship. "The Jarl has named her Sea Wolf. She'll lead our little fleet. 4 ships with 30 warriors each, enough to overwhelm any resistance quickly, not so many that we can't make a swift retreat if needed." "When do you sail?" you ask. 3 days from now, if Thor grants us favorable weather." Leif replies, "The Jarl makes a sacrifice tonight, seeking the gods' blessing for our journey." That evening, after finishing your work with Gunnar, you join most of the settlement's population as they gather in an open area near the Jarl's hall. A large fire burns in a stone-lined pit, illuminating the faces of the crowd gathered in a circle around it. At one end of the clearing stands a wooden post carved with what you recognize as images of the gods: Odin with his spear and missing eye, Thor with his hammer, Freyr with symbols of fertility and prosperity. The Jarl himself presides over the ceremony, a tall man of middle years, wearing a fine wool tunic embroidered at the neck and wrists, a cloak of bearskin fastened with silver brooches at his shoulders. His beard is elaborately braided, and he wears arm rings of twisted gold, symbols of his wealth and status. Beside him stands a woman in a long blue dress with a cloak of white feathers, a vulva or seeress, who communicates with the gods through trance and ritual. Her eyes seem to look beyond the physical world as she sways slightly, chanting words too low to hear from where you stand. The ceremony begins with the Jarl raising his hands toward the fire, calling upon the gods to witness and bless the gathering. He speaks of the journey to come, asking for fair winds, safe passage, and success in their venture. Then he turns to the vulva, who steps forward, her face illuminated by the dancing flames. She begins a chant that starts low and rises gradually, her voice taking on a quality that makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up. Though you can understand the language the Norse speak in everyday conversation, her words seem to come from somewhere beyond normal speech, perhaps an older form of the language, or words meant only for divine ears. As her chant reaches its peak, Men lead forward an ox, its horns wrapped in garlands of early summer flowers. With a swift, practiced motion, the Jarl draws a knife across the animal's throat. Blood flows into a wooden bowl held ready, and the vulva dips a bundle of fir branches into it, then walks around the gathering, sprinkling drops of blood on the assembled crowd. When she reaches you, she pauses, her eyes meeting yours with an intensity that feels like she's looking directly into your soul. She says something in that strange, archaic language, then moves on, leaving you wondering what message she might have delivered. The sacrificed ox is butchered on the spot, with certain portions burned as offerings to the gods, and the rest prepared for a communal feast. As meat roasts over the fire, horns of ale and mead are passed among the crowd. The atmosphere gradually shifts from solemn ritual to celebration, with music, dancing, and boasting of past deeds and future glories. You stay close to Astrid and her family, feeling somewhat out of place in this alien ceremony. She notices your discomfort and explains in low tones. The blot connects us to the gods, ensures their favor for the journey. Without their blessing, the ships would be at the mercy of giants and other dangers that lurk in the deep places of the world. The feast continues, late into the night, with more formal rituals interspersed with merrymaking. Oaths are sworn upon a sacred ring, promises made to share the spoils fairly, to stand together in danger, to bring honor to their people and their gods through their deeds. As the celebration reaches its height, you find yourself drawn into a dance that circles the fire, hands linked with those of strangers who, for this moment at least, accept you as one of their own. The rhythm of drums, the flicker of flames, the swirl of movement, all combine to create a sense of connection to something larger than yourself, a glimpse perhaps of what these people feel when they call upon their gods. Later, exhausted but strangely exhilarated, you walk back to the longhouse with Astrid's family. The night sky above is clear, stars scattered like frost across a black cloak. Leif points out certain constellations, explaining how they guide sailors when no land is in sight. The stars are the same in distant lands, he says thoughtfully. No matter how far we travel, they watch over us, constant as the gods themselves. You look up at those ancient stars, the same ones that shine in your own time, and feel a momentary connection across the centuries, a bridge between this world of gods and warriors and the one you've left behind. Perhaps in some ways, people haven't changed as much as you might think, still looking to the stars for guidance, still seeking meaning in the vastness of the universe. With that comforting thought, you settle onto your sleeping bench, muscles aching from work and dance, mind full of the strange and wonderful things you've witnessed. Sleep comes quickly, deep and dreamless, as your body continues to adapt to the demands of this new world. The next 2 days pass in a whirlwind of activity as the entire settlement prepares for the departure of the ships. You continue to work with Gunnar, your hands growing calloused from labor, your arms stronger from working the bellows. The forge never cools as weapons and tools are crafted, repaired, and sharpened. Other crafters are equally busy, woodworkers making oars and shields, women sewing extra clothing, and preparing food that will keep during the voyage. On the morning of the 3rd day, you wake to the sound of a horn blowing from the shore. The sailing day has arrived, and with it a sense of both excitement and tension that permeates the entire settlement. After a hasty breakfast, everyone gathers at the beach where the 4 ships wait, bobbing gently in the calm waters of the fjord. The vessels are fully laden now, provisions and weapons stowed carefully to maintain balance. Shields hang along the gunwales, their bright colors creating a protective barrier, as well as an impressive display. Each ship has its own animal-headed prow, wolves, dragons, serpents, carved and painted figures that seem alive in the morning light, ready to guide their vessels through unknown waters. The warriors who will sail are saying their goodbyes to families and friends. Some are solemn, others boisterous, but all share a common anticipation of what lies ahead. Many wear their finest clothing for this departure, tunics of good wool with colorful trim, cloaks fastened with decorative brooches, arm rings and necklaces that display their status and wealth. Life embraces Astrid tightly, then places his hands on Eric's shoulders, speaking words of encouragement and responsibility to his son. The boy stands straight, trying to appear confident and mature despite the tears that threaten at the corners of his eyes. "Watch over your mother," Leif instructs him. "The farm is in your hands until I return." "I will, father," Eric promises, his voice breaking slightly. "May Thor protect you." "And you," Leif replies, ruffling the boy's hair one last time before turning to board his ship. The Jarl steps forward to address the crowd before departure. He stands tall in the bow of the lead vessel, the Sea Wolf, his cloak billowing in the breeze, a polished helmet gleaming on his head. "Today we sail toward a new future," he proclaims, his voice carrying across the water. "Our ancestors have always followed the paths of the sea, trading with distant lands. Now we go further, seeking the wealth that will sustain our people through hard times. The gods have shown us this path through dreams and signs. They sail with us." A cheer rises from the assembled crowd. The Jarl continues, "To those who remain behind, tend the farms, care for the elderly and young, keep our settlement strong. Your work here is as important as ours across the sea. When we return with treasure and tales, the celebration will honor all who made it possible." Another cheer, and then the preparations for departure begin in earnest. Men take their places at the oars, 30 to each ship. Others prepare to push the vessels from the shore into deeper water. The ships have been loaded with care. Heavier items like food barrels and water casks placed low in the hull for stability. Weapons and personal belongings stowed under the rowing benches or along the center line. You stand with Astrid and Eric, watching as Leif takes his position near the steering oar of the second ship. He raises a hand in farewell, and then his attention turns fully to the task at hand, calling out instructions to the oarsmen as they prepare to depart. With a final horn blast, the ships begin to move. They're pushed into deeper water, oars extending like great wings on either side, dipping into the fjord in unison. Slowly at first, then with gathering speed, the vessels glide away from shore, their dragon prows seeming to come alive as they taste the salt water. Women and children run along the shoreline, waving and calling farewell until the ships round a bend in the fjord and disappear from sight. A strange silence falls over the gathered crowd as they stand watching the empty water, each person absorbed in their own thoughts and emotions. Astrid sighs deeply, then straightens her shoulders. "Well," she says briskly, "the fields won't plow themselves, and the goats need milking. Life goes on." And it does. With the departure of the ships, the settlement reorganizes itself around those who remain. Work that would normally be done by the absent men is redistributed. Young boys like Eric take on greater responsibilities. Older men who stayed behind provide guidance, and women oversee the smooth operation of farms and households. You continue to work with Gunnar, who has remained to ensure the settlement has a skilled smith for repairs and day-to-day needs. He begins to teach you more advanced skills: how to judge the temperature of metal by its color, how to create different hardnesses in the same piece, how to add simple decorative elements to functional items. "A knife can be beautiful as well as useful," he explains as he demonstrates how to hammer a pattern into a blade. "Beauty honors the gods who gave us the knowledge of metalworking." Days pass in a rhythm of labor, meals, and sleep. You find your body adapting to the physical demands of this era, growing stronger and more resilient. Your hands, once soft, now bear calluses that allow you to grip tools without pain. You learn to tell time by the position of the sun, to predict weather changes by observing clouds and wind patterns, to identify edible plants in the surrounding forests. In the evenings, there's still time for storytelling around the fire. The skald continues to share tales of gods and heroes, each story containing lessons about courage, honor, wisdom, or the consequences of breaking social norms. You realize these narratives serve as both entertainment and education, reinforcing the values that hold the community together. About 2 weeks after the ship's departure, a storm sweeps through the region. Rain pounds on the roof of the longhouse, wind howls through gaps in the walls, and lightning illuminates the darkness in brief, blinding flashes. Thunder rolls across the sky like the sound of Thor's chariot wheels, which is exactly how the Norse interpret it. Thor fights the Jotnar tonight, the old skald comments, as a particularly loud thunderclap shakes the building. The giants who bring storms and destruction. Children huddle closer to their mothers, both frightened and thrilled by the display of divine power. Even some adults make the sign of Thor's hammer for protection as lightning strikes nearby, the gesture a quick motion from forehead to chest, then shoulder to shoulder. During a brief lull in the storm, Eric voices what everyone is thinking. The ships, will they be safe? No one can answer with certainty. Everyone knows the dangers of the open sea during storms, how even the best-built vessels can be overwhelmed by massive waves or driven onto rocky shores. Prayers are offered silently and aloud for the safety of the absent warriors, their names mentioned specifically to draw the gods' attention to those in need of protection. Mourning reveals the storm's damage, a few roof sections torn away, chicken coops overturned, fields partially flooded. The community works together to make repairs, sharing labor and materials as needed. There's no formal governance structure making these decisions. Cooperation is simply understood as necessary for survival. This is how we've always lived, Astrid explains when you ask about the organization of work. Each family looks after its own needs first, but no one prospers if the settlement as a whole suffers. We help each other because tomorrow we may need help ourselves. This practical philosophy extends to all aspects of life. When a family's cow gives birth to twin calves, the extra animal is given to a neighbor whose own cow died the previous winter. When a child falls ill, women skilled in herbal medicine drop their own work to tend to them. When game is caught during a hunt, the meat is shared according to need rather than being claimed exclusively by the hunter. It's not a perfect system. You notice tensions between certain families, old grudges that simmer below the surface, personalities that clash. But the harsh realities of survival in this era enforce a level of cooperation that overrides most conflicts. A month passes with no word from the raiding party. This isn't unexpected, even in good conditions. The journey to the British Isles would take several weeks, and the raiders planned to stay long enough to make the voyage worthwhile. Still, anxiety grows as time stretches on. Then, on a clear afternoon when many people are working in the fields, a shout comes from the fjord entrance where a boy has been stationed as a lookout. Ships! Ships returning! Work is abandoned as everyone rushes to the shore, straining to see the approaching vessels. Relief washes over the crowd as 4 dragon prows come into view, all ships accounted for, all returning together as they left. But as they draw closer, it becomes apparent that the journey has taken its toll. One ship sits noticeably lower in the water, its sail patched in several places. Another shows signs of repair to its hull, fresh wood lighter than the weathered planks around it, and on all the ships there are fewer faces visible than departed. The vessels beach with less ceremony than when they left, warriors jumping into shallow water to help pull them ashore. The first men to reach land are greeted with embraces, tears, and rapid questions. Where the answers bring good news, there's joy and laughter. Where they don't, there's the beginning of grief. You stay with Astrid and Eric, watching anxiously for Leif among the returning warriors. Minutes that feel like hours pass before they spot him helping a limping comrade from one of the ships. Leif himself appears thinner than when he left, with a healing cut visible on his forearm, but otherwise unharmed. The reunion is emotional, Astrid embracing her husband fiercely while Eric tries to maintain dignity, despite his obvious relief and happiness. Leif hugs them both, his weathered face showing exhaustion, but also pride. "You've grown," he tells Eric, measuring his son's height against his own, "and the farm looks well tended." "We had good weather most days," Eric reports seriously, "and the south field has stronger wheat than last year." Leif nods with approval, then turns to include you in the conversation. "And how have you fared in our absence? Has Gunnar worked you to the bone?" Before you can answer, shouts draw everyone's attention to the ships, where men are beginning to unload their cargo. Trunks and bundles are passed from hand to hand, each item adding to piles on the shore that grow impressively large. The goods being unloaded aren't what you might have expected from raiding. There are no obvious church treasures or religious artifacts. Instead, you see practical items, rolls of fine cloth, bundles of iron tools, sacks of grain, and containers of salt. There are luxury goods as well, silver coins and arm rings, glass vessels, decorated weapons, and small ornaments of unusual design. Most surprising of all are the people being led from the ships, about 20 men, women, and a few older children with the subdued demeanor and simple clothing that mark them as captives. These are thralls, you realize with a shock, slaves taken during the raid, brought back to work the farms and households of the Norse. Seeing your expression, Leif explains matter-of-factly, "We need more hands for the fields and crafts. These people will become part of our community in time, learn our ways, perhaps even earn their freedom eventually." His casual attitude toward what seems to you a horrific practice is a stark reminder of the vast gulf between your modern values and those of this era. Slavery is simply an accepted part of their world, as it was throughout most of human history. The raiders see nothing wrong in taking human beings as property, just as they see nothing wrong in taking other goods that don't belong to them. The Jarl calls for attention, standing once again in the bow of his ship, now firmly beached on the shore. The crowd falls silent to hear his words. "The gods favored our journey," he proclaims, his voice carrying across the assembled community. "Though not without cost. We lost 5 good men to a storm on the outward voyage, and 3 more to the defenders of the Christian temple we raided. Their names will be remembered in our sagas, their courage celebrated in our songs." He pauses as murmurs of sympathy and prayer move through the crowd. Families of the lost men draw closer together, their grief fresh but tempered by pride in how their loved ones died. "But our success far outweighs our losses," the Jarl continues. "The Christian temple at Lindisfarne was rich beyond our expectations, its treasures poorly defended by monks who know nothing of fighting. We took gold, silver, precious books, and fine cloth. We took thralls to strengthen our workforce, and we took knowledge of other such places, equally wealthy, equally vulnerable." A cheer rises from the crowd, especially from the returned warriors who lived through the experience. The Jarl raises his hands for silence once more. Tonight we feast to honor our fallen comrades and celebrate our triumph. Tomorrow we divide the spoils according to our agreement. And when next summer comes, we shall sail again, with more ships and warriors, to claim the riches that await us across the sea. The announcement sends a ripple of excitement through the gathering. The success of this first raid has planted a seed that will grow into decades of Viking expansion throughout Europe, transforming the continent's political landscape and the Norse culture itself. That evening, as promised, a great feast is held in the Jarl's Hall, the largest building in the settlement where public gatherings and ceremonies take place. Long tables are set up, benches arranged on either side, and food prepared on a scale rarely seen outside of religious festivals. Some of the bounty comes from the raid itself, sacks of foreign grain now baked into bread, kegs of unfamiliar ale, even exotic spices that add new flavors to familiar dishes. The Jarl's wife presides over the preparation, directing thralls, both old and newly acquired, in the massive task of feeding the entire community. You attend with Astrid's family, seated at a table in the middle of the hall where Leif's status as a shipowner and respected navigator earns him a place of moderate honor. The truly high-status seats are near the Jarl at the head of the hall, where ship captains and the most distinguished warriors sit with their families. As the feast progresses, Leif tells his family about the journey in more detail, the challenges of navigation, the storm that nearly claimed one of their ships, the excitement of spotting land after nearly 2 weeks at sea. The monastery stood on an island, connected to the mainland only by a narrow path that floods at high tide, he explains, sketching the layout in spilled ale on the wooden tabletop. We timed our arrival for dawn, when the tide was high enough to bring our ships close, but the light still dim enough to cover our approach. Were there no warriors to defend it? Eric asks eagerly, hungry for tales of battle. Leif shakes his head. Only monks in rough woolen robes. Some tried to fight with farming tools or kitchen knives, but they had no training, no real weapons. Most fled or surrendered when they saw they couldn't win. And the treasure, Astrid inquires, more practical in her interests. Plentiful, as the Jarl said, gold crosses studded with jewels, silver chalices, boxes filled with coins. But the strangest treasures were their books, pages of thin material covered in tiny marks, bound between covers decorated with gold and jewels. The monks seemed more distressed by the loss of these than anything else. As Leif speaks, a thrall girl, perhaps 14 years old, approaches with a pitcher to refill cups at your table. She keeps her eyes downcast, her movements careful as she pours ale. You notice she has a bruise on one cheek and a healing cut on her hand, injuries perhaps received during her capture or the journey back. When she reaches Leif, he stops her with a gentle hand on her arm. "What's your name, girl?" he asks in a kind tone that surprises you given the circumstances. "Ethelflaed," she replies in a barely audible voice, the name clearly English in origin. "That's too difficult for our tongues," Leif decides. "We'll call you Flayed. Go now and help with the serving. Tomorrow you'll come to our farm. You'll work hard, but you'll be treated fairly if you obey." The girl, Flayed now, nods silently and continues her task, moving to the next table with her pitcher. You watch her go, wondering about her story, her family, the life she had before Viking ships appeared on her shores. The feast continues late into the night. As alcohol flows freely, the atmosphere grows rowdier. Warriors reenact moments from the raid, sometimes with exaggerated flourishes that draw laughter from the crowd. The skald composes verses on the spot to commemorate particularly brave or clever deeds, ensuring they'll be remembered in the oral history of the community. Music fills the hall. Drums, simple stringed instruments, flutes made of bone and wood. People dance in the open space between tables, their movements energetic and sometimes acrobatic. Even children join in, imitating their elders until they drop from exhaustion and are carried to sleeping furs arranged along the walls. Through it all, the Jarl observes from his high seat, accepting congratulations and tributes from his people. His success as a leader has been confirmed by the raid's outcome, his position strengthened by the wealth he'll distribute tomorrow. In a society where leadership depends on personal charisma and proven ability rather than formal titles or hereditary rights, such visible successes are crucial to maintaining power. Late in the evening, when many have already succumbed to exhaustion or intoxication, the vulva makes an appearance. The crowd falls silent as she enters, her feather cloak ghostly in the flickering light of the hall's fires. She carries a staff topped with brass ornaments that jingle softly as she walks to stand before the Jarl. "The gods have spoken," she announces, her voice carrying in the sudden quiet. "They are pleased with our offering before the voyage and with the courage shown by our warriors. Odin welcomes the fallen to his hall, where they feast even now as we do here." A murmur of approval runs through the assembly. The families of the dead men take particular comfort in this pronouncement, knowing their loved ones have achieved the highest honor a warrior can aspire to: a place in Valhalla, Odin's Hall of Heroes. "But the gods also warn us," the vulva continues, her tone growing more ominous. "Our success brings new dangers. Other peoples will learn to fear our ships, to prepare defenses against us. And some among us may grow too proud, forgetting that all victories come from the gods' favor, not merely human strength or skill." She fixes her gaze directly on the Jarl as she speaks these last words. Attention fills the air. Her warning could be interpreted as criticism of his leadership, a dangerous position to take publicly. But the Jarl merely nods solemnly. "The gods' wisdom is always welcome," he responds carefully. "We shall remember both their favor and their warning." Satisfied, the vulva withdraws, leaving the feast to continue in a somewhat subdued atmosphere that gradually returns to celebration as more ale is consumed and the music resumes. You find yourself next to Gunnar, who has remained relatively sober throughout the evening, observing more than participating in the revelry. "What do you think of our Viking ways now that you've seen them?" he asks, using the term Viking in its original meaning, the act of going raiding, rather than as a name for the people themselves. The question catches you off guard. "It's different from what I expected," you admit cautiously. Gunnar chuckles, a rare sound from the usually serious Smith. "Most things are," he observes. "Tales grow in the telling, like trees from seeds. 100 years from now, who knows what stories they'll tell of this first raid? Perhaps they'll say we were giants who breathed fire and ate Christian babies." His cynical humor surprises you, suggesting a perspective more nuanced than you'd given him credit for. "Do you think it was right?" you ask, keeping your voice low. "The raid, I mean." Gunnar takes a long drink before answering, his scarred face thoughtful in the dim light. "Right? Wrong? Those are complicated words. Was it necessary? Probably. 3 bad harvests in a row. Fish stocks declining in our usual waters. People were hungry, worried about winter. Now they're not." He gestures toward the thralls serving at various tables. As for them, their lives have changed, yes. Some for the worse, at least at first. But many will eventually become part of our community, marry our people, raise children who won't remember any other life. Is that better or worse than if they'd stayed where they were? Who can say? His pragmatic view reflects the reality of this era. Morality is often a luxury afforded only to those whose survival is secure. For people living on the edge of subsistence, decisions are made based on what ensures continuation of the family, the community, the way of life. As the feast finally winds down, you walk back to Astrid and Leif's longhouse with their family, now expanded by the addition of Flade, who follows silently a few paces behind. The night is clear, stars brilliant in the dark sky, the path lit by the occasional torch set at crossroads in the settlement. Eric, tired but still excited by the day's events, peppers his father with questions about the voyage, the foreign lands, the fighting techniques used during the raid. Leif answers patiently, though you notice he softens some of the harsher realities for his young son's ears. Astrid walks in silence, her expression thoughtful. Later, as everyone prepares for sleep, you overhear her speaking quietly to Leif near the banked fire. "Things will change now," she says, her voice barely above a whisper. "This success will lead to more raids, more wealth, and more danger. The world is always changing," Leif replies, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "We must change with it or be left behind. And our children, what world are we creating for them?" Leif has no immediate answer for this deeper question. He simply draws her close, both of them gazing into the glowing embers, as if seeking glimpses of the future in the dying flames. As you settle onto your sleeping bench, you reflect on how this first successful raid at Lindisfarne will ripple outward through time, setting in motion events that will transform not just Norse society, but much of Europe. The Vikings will establish settlements in England, Ireland, Normandy, and as far east as Russia and Constantinople. They'll influence language, law, art, and technology wherever they go. They'll be remembered as both brutal raiders and skilled traders, explorers and colonizers, destroyers and builders. And it all begins here, with ships returning laden with plunder, with a feast celebrating victory, with plans already forming for the next summer's voyages. You're witnessing the birth of the Viking Age, a pivotal moment in history unfolding around you in all its complex, contradictory glory. Sleep comes slowly as your mind processes everything you've experienced. When dreams finally claim you, they're filled with dragon ships sailing unknown waters, with skalds singing tales of gods and heroes, with the faces of people, Norse and Thrall alike, caught in the currents of history, carried toward futures they cannot possibly imagine. The morning after the feast brings a more solemn, organized event, the division of plunder among those who participated in the raid. This takes place in the open area before the Jarl's Hall, with the entire community gathering to witness the proceedings. The sharing of wealth is not just about material gain. It's a public performance that reinforces social bonds and hierarchies within the community. The Jarl oversees the division personally, seated on a carved chair brought out from his hall. Before him, the spoils of Lindisfarne are arranged on woolen cloths spread over the ground, silver pieces sorted by weight, jeweled religious objects, bundles of fine fabric, weapons, and practical items like tools and cooking vessels. "According to our agreement before sailing," the Jarl announces, "the goods will be divided thus: 1/3 to outfit the ships and provide for families of the fallen, 1/3 divided among all who sailed based on their contribution, and 1/3 to be distributed at my discretion to reward exceptional service." This formula seems to be accepted without question, likely a traditional arrangement that everyone understands and considers fair. The Jarl begins by setting aside the first third, which will be used for community needs. From the remainder, each warrior receives a share proportionate to his role in the expedition. Ship captains receive more than ordinary crew members. Those who fought especially bravely get bonus items, and those who contributed specialized skills like navigation are recognized accordingly. Leif, as both a ship owner and chief navigator, receives a substantial portion: silver arm rings, a finely crafted sword from Frankish lands, likely obtained through previous trade rather than directly from Lindisfarne, and several ells of English woolen cloth finer than anything produced locally. "The cloth is for you," he tells Astrid when he returns to where his family watches the proceedings. "The sword I'll keep for now, but it will be Eric's when he's ready." The boy's eyes widen at this promise. Inheritance of weapons, especially fine ones, is an important tradition, both practically valuable and symbolically significant as a mark of family continuity and status. The thralls captured during the raid are also distributed, with the Jarl taking first choice of several strong men and a woman skilled in weaving, then allocating the rest according to need and merit. There's no attempt to keep families together. A mother and daughter are separated without ceremony, despite their obvious distress. Flade, already assigned to Leif's household, stands quietly throughout the proceedings, her face carefully blank as she watches her countrymen and women distributed like any other goods. You wonder what thoughts lie behind that controlled expression, what memories of home and family she carries silently within her. The distribution ceremony concludes by midday, but its effects ripple through the settlement for days afterward. New wealth creates possibilities, materials for better tools, ingredients for more varied food, luxury items that elevate status. Those who benefited most from the raid, like Leif, gain increased standing in the community, their opinions carrying more weight in discussions, their friendship more actively sought by others. Summer progresses, the days long and generally pleasant in these northern latitudes. Crops grow in the fields surrounding the settlement, tended carefully to ensure maximum yield. Fishing continues in the calm waters of the fjord and beyond when weather permits. Children gather berries and edible plants from the surrounding forests, adding variety to the community's diet. You continue to work with Gunnar, your skills improving steadily under his gruff tutelage. The forge becomes a place of both labor and learning as you absorb not just techniques, but also stories and wisdom from the experienced smith. "Iron remembers," Gunnar tells you one day, as he demonstrates how to fold and refold metal to create patterns in a blade. Every hammer blow, every heating and cooling shapes its nature. Like people, our experiences forge us, temper us, make us strong or brittle, depending on how we're handled. Life in Leif and Astrid's household adjusts to include Flayed, the English thrall girl. Initially withdrawn and silent, she gradually becomes more integrated into daily routines. Her weaving skills prove valuable, and she learns Norse quickly out of necessity. You notice that while she's clearly not considered an equal, Astrid treats her firmly but not cruelly, and even Eric develops a protective attitude toward her after scaring off some local boys who were taunting the foreign girl. "She's ours now," you overhear him telling the other boys. "Father brought her back for our household, and no one disrespects what belongs to us." His possessive phrasing makes you wince, but you recognize that in his mind, being theirs offers Flayed protection and a defined place in the social order. It's a complex relationship that can't be simply categorized as either purely exploitative or benevolent. One evening, helping Flayed carry water from the stream, you manage a private conversation away from Norse ears. "Where are you from?" you ask quietly, speaking slowly to accommodate her still developing comprehension of Norse. "Northumbria," she replies after a cautious glance around. "My father was a craftsman at Lindisfarne. He made books." She struggles to find the Norse word, eventually resorting to a gesture of turning pages. "And your family? Were they?" She shakes her head sharply, cutting off the question. "Dead now, better not to speak of them." Her abrupt response silences further questions, but as you walk back together, she adds softly, "It helps to work, to learn. If I am useful, perhaps someday." She trails off, but her meaning is clear. Thralls can eventually gain freedom in Norse society, especially those who prove their value and adapt to their new culture. This glimpse into Flade's perspective reminds you that history is lived by individuals with their own hopes, fears, and strategies for survival. Behind the broad strokes of historical events, invasions, conquests, cultural exchanges, are countless personal stories like hers, most forever unrecorded. As summer reaches its height, the Jarl calls another assembly to discuss plans already forming for the following year. The success at Lindisfarne has whetted appetites for further raids, and information gathered during that expedition has revealed other tempting targets along the coasts of England, Scotland, and Ireland. "We should build more ships," one man argues during the discussion. 4 was enough for Lindisfarne, but if we target larger settlements or expect resistance, we'll need greater numbers. "And train more warriors," adds another. Many young men who stayed behind this year are eager to join the next voyage. The debate continues, with various viewpoints expressed about priorities, strategies, and the balance between raiding and the settlement's ongoing needs. Unlike modern political systems with clearly defined voting procedures, decisions here emerge through a process of discussion, persuasion, and gradual consensus building, with the Jarl having significant influence but not absolute authority. The assembly concludes with agreements to begin construction of 2 additional ships over the winter to increase training of young warriors and to establish more formal relations with neighboring Norse settlements that might contribute to the expanded raiding fleet next summer. Resources from the Lindisfarne raid will fund much of this preparation, creating a self-reinforcing cycle that will fuel Viking expansion for generations to come. As autumn approaches, the pace of work intensifies. Harvests must be gathered, fish caught and preserved, meat smoked or salted, fruits and vegetables stored in ways that will keep them edible through the long northern winter. Every member of the community participates in this essential work, even children and the elderly contributing according to their abilities. You find yourself drawn into these activities alongside your continuing work with Gunnar. There's a satisfying rhythm to the harvesting, the swing of a scythe through golden grain, the gathering of sheaves, the threshing that separates valuable kernels from the straw. Though physically demanding, the work happens in a social atmosphere, with songs, stories, and jokes helping to pass the time and lighten the labor. "This is how it's always been," the old skald tells you as he rests in the shade, too frail now for heavy work, but contributing by entertaining the workers. Since the time of our earliest ancestors, the gathering of the harvest has been both work and celebration, a time when the community comes together to ensure survival through the dark months ahead. As the days grow shorter and the air takes on the crispness of approaching winter, the settlement prepares for the winter solstice celebration, the time known as Yule in the Norse calendar. This festival marks the longest night of the year and the subsequent return of the sun, a crucial turning point, both practically and spiritually. Preparations begin weeks in advance. Special foods are prepared, bread baked in ritual shapes, meat set aside from the autumn slaughter, ale brewed stronger than usual. The longhouses are cleaned thoroughly and decorated with evergreen boughs that symbolize life continuing through winter's apparent death. On the day of the solstice itself, activity begins before dawn and continues well into the night. A massive bonfire is built in the central gathering area, its flames symbolically strengthening the weakened sun. The Jarl sacrifices a boar to Freyr, the god associated with fertility and prosperity, asking for his blessing during the coming year. The community gathers for a feast even more lavish than the one that celebrated the raiders' return. Tables groan under the weight of food, roasted meats, preserved fruits, bread, cheese, and sweets made with precious honey. Ale and mead flow freely, their intoxicating effects considered part of the spiritual experience, a way of connecting with divine forces. Music, dance, and ritual blend together throughout the celebration. Children run laughing through the settlement with torches, symbolically bringing light back to the world. Couples slip away into the darkness, their unions during the sacred time believed to be especially blessed. Elders tell tales of the god's own Yuletide celebrations in Asgard, creating parallels between divine and human experience. The vulva performs divination rituals, casting rune stones and interpreting their patterns to foretell what the coming year will bring. Her prophecies are deliberately ambiguous: good harvests if the gods are properly honored, successful raids if courage doesn't falter, health for those who maintain right relations with divine powers. These predictions offer both guidance and flexibility, allowing for adjustment based on future developments. Near midnight, at the depth of the longest darkness, a solemn ritual takes place. The Jarl and other leading men of the community take oaths on a sacred ring dedicated to Freyr, swearing to uphold laws, protect the settlement, and honor the gods in the year to come. These promises have both religious and social significance, binding the leadership to their responsibilities and reaffirming the community's shared values. Leif participates in this oath-taking, placing his hand on the ring and speaking words that commit him to specific actions in the coming year, including leading one of the ships in the planned expanded raids. Eric watches with pride and longing, eager for the day when he too will be considered a man, able to take part in such rituals and expeditions. The Yule celebration continues for 3 days, gradually transitioning from formal religious observances to more relaxed socializing. Work is minimized during this time, with only essential tasks like tending animals performed. It's a welcome break before the deep winter sets in, bringing shorter days, colder temperatures, and the inevitable challenges of the season. Winter in the Viking settlement is a time of contrasts. Outside, the world seems dormant, fields covered in snow, the fjord sometimes frozen near the shores, daylight lasting only a few hours. But inside the longhouses, life continues with surprising vigor and variety. This is the season for indoor crafts, weaving, carving, repair of tools and equipment. Men work on building components for the new ships, shaping strakes and fashioning the dragon heads that will adorn the prows come spring. Women spin and weave, turning wool into the fabric that will clothe the community. Children learn these skills alongside their parents, education happening through observation and gradually increasing participation rather than formal instruction. Evenings are devoted to storytelling, music, and games. The old skald shares tales of the gods and heroes, but also stories of the community's own ancestors, keeping their memory and deeds alive. People play board games like Hanifatafel, a strategic challenge that simulates defense against attackers, or simple dice games that combine chance with wagers that add excitement to long winter nights. You discover that the Norse are far from the uncultured barbarians often portrayed in later European writings. They have rich artistic traditions expressed in woodcarving, metalwork, and textile design. Their poetry follows complex structural rules with careful attention to alliteration and rhythm. Their understanding of navigation, shipbuilding, and weather patterns reflects sophisticated observational science, even without formal scientific methods as you know them. The winter passes more quickly than you expected, each day filled with work, learning, and social interaction. You find your place within the community becoming more established, no longer a strange outsider, but someone with recognized skills and contributions to make. Gunnar speaks of taking you on as a formal apprentice when spring comes, a significant step that would give you a defined role and path toward eventual independence. But your growing integration into Norse society also brings complications. As you understand more of their language and customs, you're expected to participate more fully in all aspects of community life, including religious rituals that honor gods you know will eventually be displaced by Christianity, preparations for raids that will bring violence to innocent communities, and the everyday acceptance of thraldom that conflicts with your modern ethical principles. These tensions come to a head one evening when Leif, inspecting the growing pile of woodwork for his ship, speaks directly about your potential role in the coming raiding season. "You've grown stronger since you came to us," he observes, watching you help move a newly carved oar into place. Gunnar says you learn quickly. You could be useful on the ships this summer. The invitation, for that's what it is, despite the practical framing, catches you off guard. Participating in a Viking raid would give you unprecedented historical insights, a direct experience of events usually known only through fragmented records and archaeological evidence, but it would also make you complicit in violence and theft, possibly even the taking of lives and liberty from people like Flayed. "I need to consider this," you reply carefully, aware that refusing outright might damage your position in the community. "It's a significant opportunity." Leif nods, seeming to understand your hesitation, if not its exact nature. "Think on it. There's time yet before we must decide the ship's company." That night, sleep eludes you as you ponder this dilemma. Your presence here hasn't changed the course of history. Lindisfarne was raided just as the historical record shows, and the expansion of Viking activity is proceeding as it did in the timeline you know. You're an observer to these events, not their cause. But joining a raid would cross a line from observation to participation in a way that feels profoundly troubling. Your thoughts are interrupted by a soft sound nearby. Rising on one elbow, you see Flayed sitting up on her sleeping bench, her face wet with silent tears. She doesn't notice your attention, lost in her own private grief, illuminated only by the faint glow of the banked fire. The sight crystallizes your moral quandary. Real people suffered in the historical events unfolding around you. To participate would be to directly contribute to that suffering, regardless of how inevitable these events might be in the larger sweep of history. Before you can decide how to respond, whether to offer comfort to Flayed or pretend sleep to give her privacy in her grief, a more dramatic interruption occurs. Horn blasts pierce the night, sharp and urgent, the signal for danger or attack. Within moments, the longhouse erupts into activity as Leif leaps up, reaching for his sword, even as he calls for others to wake. "Raiders!" comes the shout from outside. From the south, 3 ships. The irony isn't lost on you, the raiders themselves facing a raid. This region of scattered settlements, limited formal governance, and wealth accumulated through both trade and plunder creates a landscape where such attacks are always a possibility. Not all Norse are allies. Different groups compete for resources and prestige, sometimes violently. Leif is already strapping on his sword belt. "Eric, help your mother gather valuables. Into the forest if they breach the settlement." He turns to you. "Can you fight?" It's a moment of decision in more ways than one. Fighting to defend the community that has sheltered you feels different from participating in an offensive raid, but violence is violence, and you have no practice with Viking-era weapons. "I'll do what I can," you answer, which is truthfully ambiguous enough to satisfy Leif, who nods and tosses you an axe, not a specialized battle axe, but a common wood-cutting tool that can serve as a weapon in emergency. Outside, the settlement is in organized chaos. Women and children gather essential supplies and prepare to retreat to predetermined hiding places in the surrounding forest if necessary. Men arm themselves and assemble in fighting groups, directed by the Jarl and other experienced warriors. Older boys run as messengers between groups, carrying orders and information. From the shore comes the sound of battle already joined, shouts, the clash of weapons, cries of pain and defiance. The attackers have beached their ships and are pushing into the settlement, facing resistance from those who were on watch or quick to respond. They came with the late tide, using darkness for cover, reports a breathless messenger to the Jarl. 20 or 30 warriors at least. Their target? The Jarl demands. The hall, most likely, the messenger replies. They know of our success at Lindisfarne. The Jarl nods grimly. Then we defend the hall. Osgrim, take 10 men around to the western approach. Leif, your group holds the direct path. I'll lead the main defense at the hall itself. Leif gestures for those assigned to him, including you, to follow as he moves toward a position between the advancing raiders and the Jarl's hall. In the confusion of darkness, with only partial moonlight and scattered torches for illumination, it's hard to get a clear picture of what's happening. You stay close to Leif, axe gripped tightly, heart pounding with a combination of fear and unwanted excitement. Hold together, Leif instructs the men with him. Let them come to us. We know this ground. They don't. You take position behind a woodpile that offers some cover, while allowing you to see the path the raiders would likely take. Minutes stretch into what feels like hours as you wait, straining to interpret distant sounds of conflict, trying to judge how the battle is progressing elsewhere in the settlement. Then, suddenly, movement in the darkness ahead, shapes moving quickly between buildings, trying to stay to shadows. Leif signals for silence, allowing the approaching group to draw closer before revealing your presence. When the raiders are just 20 paces away, Leif gives the signal. 3 archers with your group loose arrows, finding targets with practiced accuracy. 2 raiders fall immediately. A third staggers, but keeps coming. Then it's close quarters combat as the groups clash together. The violence is nothing like choreographed movie fights. It's chaotic, desperate, brutally direct. Men aim for killing blows immediately, without the extended dueling seen in films. A sword thrust to the gut, an axe to the neck or face, a spear driven through a thigh to bring an opponent down for a finishing blow. The fighting is quick, savage, and terrifyingly efficient. You hang back, overwhelmed by the reality of combat, until a raider breaks through the line and charges directly at you. Instinct takes over as you swing your axe, aiming more to create distance than to strike a lethal blow. The axe head catches the man's upraised arm, cutting deeply. He howls in pain, but keeps coming, sword raised in his other hand. Before he can reach you, Eric, who was supposed to be helping his mother but obviously slipped away to join the fighting, appears from nowhere and drives a short spear into the raider's side. The man crumples, his sword falling harmlessly to the ground. Eric stands frozen, eyes wide with shock at what he's done. This is clearly his first kill, a moment both traumatic and, in this society, transformative. You pull him back to safety as the fighting continues around you, his face pale in the moonlight, breath coming in short gasps. I killed him, the boy stammers, part horror, part disbelieving pride. You saved me, you reply, holding his shoulders steady. Breathe. Stay focused. We're still in danger. The warning is timely. Another wave of raiders is approaching, having pushed through defenses elsewhere. Leif and the remaining men in your group fall back toward the Jarl's Hall, where the main defense is centered. You keep Eric close as you retreat, watching for attacks from the sides or rear. The hall itself has been prepared for defense, with shields reinforcing the walls and men positioned at all potential entry points. You join the defenders inside, where the Jarl is directing operations with calm authority, despite blood staining one sleeve from a wound already received. "They're after our Lindisfarne treasure," he tells the assembled men. "Perhaps they think we're still celebrating Yule, our guard down, and our reflexes dulled by ale. They'll learn differently before this night ends." His confidence is justified. While the raiders have the advantage of surprise, the defenders have superior numbers, knowledge of the terrain, and the motivation of protecting their homes and families. The battle rages for perhaps an hour before the attackers, suffering significant casualties and making little headway against the organized defense, begin to withdraw. "They're returning to their ships," comes the cry from outside. They flee. There's no immediate celebration. It could be a trick, or the raiders might regroup for another attempt. The Jarl orders continued vigilance, sending scouts to confirm the enemy's retreat and search for any who might be hiding within the settlement. Dawn reveals the cost of the night's conflict. 6 defenders lie dead, with another dozen nursing wounds of varying severity. The raiders left 8 of their own dead behind, plus 2 so badly wounded they couldn't be moved, now captives who will likely become thralls if they survive their injuries. The settlement has suffered damage as well. Several buildings burned, stored goods stolen or destroyed, animals killed or scattered. But the main target, the wealth from Lindisfarne kept in the Jarl's hall, remains secure. A somber ceremony is held for the fallen defenders, their bodies prepared for burial with their weapons and personal items, as befits warriors who died protecting their community. The Jarl speaks of each man individually, recounting his virtues and contributions, ensuring his memory will be preserved in the community's oral history. "They feast in Valhalla now," the Jarl concludes, "honored guests at Odin's table. Their courage will inspire us as we rebuild what was damaged and strengthen our defenses against future attacks." Eric, now publicly acknowledged for his first kill despite his young age, stands taller during the ceremony. The experience has aged him, pushing him more rapidly toward adult status in a society where martial prowess is highly valued. Life watches his son with a complex expression, pride mingled with a parent's natural concern, recognition that the boy is changing irrevocably. In the days that follow, the settlement repairs physical damage while processing the emotional impact of the attack. The experience has shaken assumptions of security, leading to increased emphasis on defenses, more regular watches, improvements to the simple palisade that surrounds the central area, better systems for raising alarm. It also accelerates preparations for the coming raiding season. We've seen what happens to those who grow wealthy without the strength to protect their riches, the Jarl points out during an assembly called to adjust plans. We must be both prosperous and powerful, feared enough that others think twice before attacking us. There's logic to this perspective, given the realities of the era. With no overarching government to provide security and enforce laws, communities must essentially protect themselves or become victims. The same ships that enable trade and raiding serve as deterrents when visible in a settlement's harbor, signs of strength and mobility that potential attackers must consider. For you personally, the raid brings unexpected clarity. Experiencing violence directly, both the threat to yourself and witnessing the killing around you, crystallizes your feelings about participating in the upcoming expeditions. When Leif again raises the possibility, you have a ready answer. "I'm grateful for the offer," you tell him, choosing words carefully to avoid offense. "But I believe I serve better here, continuing my work with Gunnar. helping maintain what's needed at home. Rather than disappointment, Leif shows understanding. Not everyone is meant for the raiding life, he acknowledges. The settlement needs skilled crafters as much as warriors. Gunnar speaks well of your progress. This conversation marks a turning point in your relationship with the Norse community. By making a clear choice about your role, you've moved from ambiguous outsider to someone with a defined place in the social structure. You're becoming, in their eyes, and perhaps to some degree in your own mind, part of their world rather than merely an observer passing through. Spring advances, bringing longer days, milder weather, and renewed activity throughout the settlement. Fields are prepared for planting, fishing increases as the fjord becomes more navigable, and construction of the new ships proceeds rapidly now that the wood has been properly seasoned over winter. The vessels take shape on the shore, longer and more imposing than the existing fleet, designed specifically for the dual purposes of raiding and transporting significant cargo back home. Their dragon-head prows are carved with particular ferocity, intended to strike fear into those who see them approaching hostile shores. By late spring, the expanded fleet stands ready, 6 ships that can carry nearly 200 warriors, along with supplies for an extended journey. The planned raids are more ambitious than the previous year's expedition, targeting not just isolated monasteries, but also trading centers where greater wealth might be found. Leif will captain one of the ships, his navigational skills too valuable to leave behind despite Astrid's obvious concern about him departing again. Eric, though eager to join the raiders, is still considered too young, a judgment that leads to bitter arguments until Leif finally puts his foot down with uncharacteristic sharpness. "The farm needs you," he tells his son firmly. "Your mother needs you. Prove yourself capable of these responsibilities, and next year we'll speak again of raiding Sao." As departure day approaches, you find yourself drawn into the preparations despite your decision not to sail. Gunnar has you working long hours to complete needed metalwork, repairs to existing weapons, fittings for the new ships, tools that will be useful during the voyage. The forge burns continuously, and your skills are tested to their limits by the variety and volume of work required. On the evening before the ships are to depart, a ritual similar to the previous years takes place. The vulva performs sacrifices, blood is sprinkled on the assembled warriors, and oaths are taken to ensure proper behavior during the expedition. But there's a difference in tone, less uncertainty, more confidence born of previous success and expanded capabilities. "The gods favored us before," the Jarl declares, "and they will favor us again if we prove worthy of their blessing. We sail not just for ourselves, but for our families, our settlement, our ancestors, who watch us from Odin's hall. Let every warrior remember this. Your deeds across the sea will echo here at home, bringing either honor or shame to your name and lineage." The departure itself, witnessed at dawn the next day, is an impressive spectacle. 6 dragon ships, their sails catching the early light as they move into the deeper waters of the fjord, oars rising and falling in perfect unison, carrying men whose faces mix excitement, determination, and in some cases apprehension about what lies ahead. You stand with Astrid, Eric, and others remaining behind, watching until the ships disappear around a bend in the fjord. An odd silence falls over the gathering after the last vessel vanishes from sight, a communal exhalation as tension breaks, followed by the gradual resumption of conversation as people turn to the tasks that will occupy them during the men's absence. "And now we wait," Astrid says simply, her expression composed, despite the concern, she feels. "And we work, and we prepare for their return, as women have always done when men seek glory in distant places." Her words capture an essential aspect of Norse society during the Viking Age, the division of roles that sends men to raid foreign shores, while women maintain the home community, each gender with its own sphere of power and responsibility. It's a partnership of necessity, born of harsh conditions and limited resources, that shapes family structures, social organizations, and individual lives throughout this era. Life in the settlement settles into a pattern similar to the previous year's routine during the raiders' absence. Fields are tended, fishing continues, crafts are practiced, and children are raised with the constant awareness that survival depends on everyone contributing according to their abilities. The community naturally reorganizes itself around those who remain, with older men, adolescent boys, and women taking on leadership roles, usually held by the absent warriors. You continue your apprenticeship with Gunner, your skills advancing to the point where you can now complete simpler projects independently. There's satisfaction in this progress, in creating objects of both beauty and function with your own hands, in knowing your work contributes tangibly to the community's welfare. Weeks pass with no word from the raiding fleet, which is expected. There's no postal service or communication system that could bring messages from distant shores. Everyone understands that news will come only with the ships themselves, hopefully laden with new wealth, but possibly bearing tidings of loss and failure. Then, on a clear summer day when many people are working in the fields, the lookout boy stationed at the fjord entrance gives the signal, ships approaching, sails visible on the horizon. The community mobilizes quickly, work abandoned as people hurry to the shore to see which vessels return and who they carry. As the ships draw closer, a cheer rises from the crowd. All 6 vessels are accounted for, their dragon prows cutting proudly through the water as they make their final approach to home. The raiders have returned, apparently successful in their ventures across the sea. But there's something different about this homecoming. The ships carry not just plunder, but also what appear to be household goods and additional people, women and children, as well as the expected thralls. And among the warriors, some show signs of injuries more serious than typically sustained in short raids, suggesting extended fighting or possibly even battles against organized resistance. As the vessels beach and the warriors disembark, it becomes clear that this expedition differed significantly from the previous year's quick attack on Lindisfarne. Leif, thinner than when he left but otherwise unharmed, embraces Astrid and Eric before turning to include you in his greeting. "We've much to tell," he says, his expression suggesting experiences both triumphant and sobering. "This journey has changed everything." And as the returned raiders share their tales in the celebration that follows, you begin to understand just how significant this expedition has been. They raided not just monasteries, but coastal settlements, penetrating deeper into territories that had never before seen Norse ships. They established a winter camp on a small island off the Scottish coast, using it as a base for continued operations rather than immediately returning home. Most importantly, they've brought back not just plunder, but knowledge, detailed information about lands, peoples, defenses, and opportunities that will inform Norse expansion for generations to come. The Viking Age is now truly underway, moving beyond isolated raids to a systematic exploration and exploitation of territories across the North Sea and beyond. That night, as tales are shared around fires throughout the settlement, you realize you're witnessing history unfold in real time, the transformation of Norse society through contact with outside cultures, the beginning of changes that will eventually lead to the Norman conquest of England, the settlement of Iceland and Greenland, even the first European discovery of North America centuries before Columbus. The world is changing around you, shaped by dragon ships and the ambitious men who sail them, by the communities that support those voyages, and by the complex interplay of necessity, opportunity, courage and cruelty that drive